webinar today about studying law in the UK. I will get back to sharing my screen. So yes, so today we are going to be covering the practice of law, studying of law in the UK, and also have a look at Oxford and Cambridge universities because there are particular unique requirements for Oxford and Cambridge in the UK. We're joined by our wonderful guest Sophie today, who I'll pass over in a little bit, who is a practicing lawyer, also studied at Oxford as well, and is going to give us a overview of the whole legal educational journey and looking at the entrance exams, etc. If we'll go into that in a little bit as well. So the rules of the meeting are we're recording the meeting, and I will post it online. Give me about 24 hours to upload it to YouTube, and I'll send a link to the video out to everybody that has registered today. If you can keep your microphones muted unless you are speaking, you can raise your hand during one of the Q&A sessions, but actually we're more friendly with that. You can raise your hand at any time to ask a question, and I've left, you can, all the microphones are enabled, so if you want to ask a question at any time, feel free. Or you can post, if you're a bit shy, you can post your questions in the chat or the Q&A section. Let's make it all in the chat to make it easier. And we will have some breakout rooms afterwards, after Sophie's finished, after we wrapped up. So if you want to talk to us about university applications in the UK particularly, and any follow-ups, then we can do so. And please don't be shy. This presentation, this webinar is all for you. Ask as many questions as you want. As Sophie just said, there aren't any bad questions. It's all about helping you understand the journey of law in the UK to help you make the best decision possible to do that. So our agenda is we're introducing each other right at the moment, and then we're going to talk about the LNAT, which is the Legal National Aptitude Test. Is that right? Yes, I think so. Which is the exam which a big in the UK require for applying to their law school. And we'll have a Q&A session about that. And then law interviews, in particular, a lot of universities require interviews as well. So we'll go through what's required for that and the Q&A. And then the particulars about Oxford, Cambridge as well, for those of you who might be interested in going there. Q&A about that. And then we'll do a wrap up. And if people wish to go to the breakout rooms, we'll do that afterwards. So a little bit about us and me. My name is Patrick Cheeseman. I'm a partnerships manager for G-Links. I'm a UK certified counsellor, agent and counsellor trainer. I'm not a counsellor in the company though, I'm the partnership manager. We have a fantastic team of counsellors spread out all over the GCC. So if you're joining us from the UAE, Oman, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain or India, we have a team there in the background. I have to apologise, I'm working from home today and you might hear my cat occasionally. G-Links is been in business for over 14 years. We're KHDA certified in the UAE, and also we have certifications for all the countries we operate in. And essentially, we help students with career counselling, finding the right university courses, application submissions, visa, departure check, pre-departure checks, post-landing support. And we have a large alumni network ourselves. So we'll try, if you're going to a particular university in a particular country, say in the UK, we'll try to connect you with existing students who are either the university of your choice already, or at least in the UK, so you can have conversations about what practically life is like in that particular university or in the country. But we don't, we're not just about getting you to university. We want to make sure you have all the skills and the understanding of what life is going to be like there when you start, because that's almost as important as the academics. No, it's not just about studying. It's also about having fun, making connections, making new friends, learning to be independent. Because we know in this part of the world, a lot of people are well looked after, and you go out to a new country, start in a new country, and it's a bit of a cultural shock, particularly things like the weather and life in general. So we're there to prepare you so you understand what it's like when you go, and all the things associated with that. So essentially, we're here to simplify your future. So that's all I want to say about us for the moment. I'm going to pass over to Sophie now. So I'm going to stop my sharing.
Great.
There you go. You should be able to share.
Perfect. Thank you, Patrick. Okay. Perfect. Can everybody see this presentation?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So a little bit about me just to start. I'm Sophie. I studied law at the University of Reading in the UK. That's where I did my first law degree, so my undergraduate. I then studied law in a form of a master's at the University of Oxford. I specialised in crime in that master's. I then, a few years later, completed my barrister training course, which is known as the BTC, and I'll speak a little bit more about that later. But what that means is I am a qualified barrister. I am at the moment, I'm working at the law firm Kingsley Napley. I'm working as a paralegal. For those that maybe aren't aware of that position, you assist lawyers. You're quite a junior member of staff, but it's a great exposure to the legal industry. And I'm doing that just while I wait until next year when I start as a barrister, and I will be practicing in crime at a chambers called 25 Bedford Row. So that's just a little bit about me. But now moving on to the LNAT, which stands for the Law National Admissions Test. Now, this test is about your aptitude for studying law and doesn't test your knowledge of law. There is no legal knowledge required at all. And I often remind my students who are taking it, this test, it doesn't matter where in the world you sit it, this test covers the same syllabus, if you like, although there is no set syllabus, but everybody is examined around the world. There's no differences made from country to country. And what that means is it's actually quite broad because it needs to apply to everyone. So in total, the test is 2 hours, 15 minutes long. And there are two sections. There's part A and part B. You have to take it at a test centre. So you have to find one in your country and you must register for an account in order to be able to book. And you must have your ID because you are applying to a university. They want to make sure that the person who sits the test is the person they are accepting an admission for. So just a tip to make sure you check those ID requirements before you arrive, rather than have a bit of a nightmare on the day. And the timings for taking the LNAT are slightly different depending on the university in England you're applying to. So ordinarily, if you were applying to a non-Oxbridge university, so any university that's not Oxford or Cambridge, you have to register to take the test by the 15th of January and take it before the end of January. However, for Oxford and Cambridge, and we'll speak more about that later, but they tend to recruit slightly earlier in the year because I think there's more to do. So you have to register for your test by the 15th of September and take it before the 15th of October. So it's good to be aware of those deadlines in your preparation. And lastly, it is a closed book exam. You can't bring in a pen or a paper or any materials. They will give you a whiteboard and a whiteboard pen, but you're not allowed to bring in any of your own notebooks or anything like that, even if they are blank. So my general overview of tips and tricks for this is to start your preparations early. On the face of it, it does seem like a pretty difficult test because it is a lot about comprehension and reading quickly in a timed environment. But I think it's less daunting if you start those preparations early and really get a handle on what they're asking you to do, which comes with time and practice. My second tip would be keep up with global current affairs, which I'm sure if you are aspiring to attend university, you probably do anyway. But because, as I mentioned before, the global nature of the test, that everyone taking it is from a completely different background or country, the questions tend to be quite broad. So it's good to know what's going on in the world so you can apply that knowledge. Thirdly, use reputable news sources, by which I mean, in part A, I'll get onto this in the next slide, but you're asked to read from passages of text, and quite often the style that those passages are written in is quite similar to broadsheet newspapers in the UK. So resources like The Times, The Guardian, just good quality journalism, just so you get used to the style, the language, and the subject matter. Fourthly, familiarize yourself with the layout and format of the test. The test is on a screen, and the LNAT website kind of allows you in advance to go into that program on your own laptop, so you can just really see what it's like to click through. There's a flagging system, so you can flag some questions if you want to return to them. And so on the day that the visuals of the test aren't a shock. So I'd really recommend getting ahead of that one, because that is something you can control and do in advance. Lastly, well, second to last, consider the timed conditions. The test is split into two, and say you want to use more time for the beginning bit or the end bit, you can't do that. Part A is a set time, and after that, your screen will just move you on to part B, and vice versa. You don't get to use any extra minutes. And with that, I emphasize that there's no points or marks for speed. So that is not taken into consideration at all. Your university won't know how quickly you've done it. So there's no point in zooming through. It's not going to benefit you. And lastly, what I like to call productive practice. So when you're doing your practice tests, are you considering in depth afterwards where you went wrong? Are you looking at their examples and really getting into the mind of the examiner, getting into the mind of the test, if you'd like? What is the repeated patterns in the answers? How did they get there? Because the more you can think like the test, the better you'll do, which I think will make sense when you start to do it. So part A specifically is 42 multiple choice questions across 12 passages in total. So by passages, you'll get some text. It will maybe be 3 or 4 paragraphs. It can be about anything, and it's often incredibly dense. So some of the examples are about philosophy and theology. Some of the examples are quite science-based. And it's really to test, can you select and withdraw information? And under each passage, there'll be a few questions, maybe 3, sometimes 4. It's not necessarily split evenly. There is only one correct answer, and you have 95 minutes to answer all of those 42 questions. The mark you get out of 42 is known as your LNAT score. Another really key thing to remember when you do this test is you have to forget your existing knowledge. Some of the tricks, or the mean answers I like to call them if I'm teaching it, is that they want you to go with what you know is right, but that's a trap. The answer is actually what it says in the text, even if you might not agree or think it's far-fetched. It's almost a deliberate tool to throw you off, so you have to really forget anything you already know about the topic. As I said, no extra marks for speed or time taken, and you can flag difficult questions that you maybe want to return to at the end if you have time. So part B. Part B is very different. This is the essay section. You have a total of 40 minutes, not very long at all, and the maximum you're allowed to write is 750 words. Sorry, I'm just admitting someone who was in the lobby. You get a choice of 3 essay questions, and you won't know those in advance. They will be at random. I would recommend you take 5 minutes to plan, 30 minutes to write, and 5 minutes to review. I'd also recommend that you take the time to really read the questions and pick the one that's right for you. In a similar way to part A, you are really being tested on how you write, is much more emphasis is placed on than your views or opinions. As I said, take the time to plan properly, think about what you're going to say in each paragraph, because you don't have the time necessarily to explore the subject in as much detail as you'd like. And therefore, it's really important to be realistic. Don't be over ambitious about how much you can get done, because then you're at risk of not finishing and you might lose some marks for structure. So it's better to, I'd say, underestimate your ability of just how much you can write in this small time. And then you've got time to go over and check it and review it with the 5 minutes at the end. Now, a lot of people applying to study law are thinking about language and thinking about writing. I mean, I'm very junior in practice, but in my view, precision, clarity, and being concise is much more valuable than long, lofty, wordy sentences. Can you make your point really clearly, and can you make it in about 5 words? That is what people you're briefing when you're older will want to hear. That is what is crucial in your personal statements. So just really remember that it's not necessarily the longest, most complicated sentences that have the most impact. It's if somebody's reading these, they're an admissions tutor, they're reading a lot of them and they're reading them quickly and they maybe don't have that much time. So can you capture their attention? Are they able to really understand your argument without trying too hard? So they're not having to reread sentences. It's really clear for them why they should admit you based on this essay. So some sample questions are: how should judges be appointed? Make the best case you can for the public funding of the arts. Does it matter if some animal and plant species die out? Is it right that students contribute to the cost of their degrees? Now, I hope this kind of becomes clear, the point I was making earlier about that these questions are very vague, they are very broad. And in my view, that's just because the amount of people that are taking the test, they can't be UK centric. So what they all have in common, these questions, is politics, ethics, values, weighing up arguments. I like to, when I teach it, get my students to really drill down into what these questions are asking, which is in some themes quite a lot about how much power should governments have, how should state money be spent, areas where there is conflict between maybe the rights of the individual and the broader needs of society. For example, that one can really be seen in the question on terrorism there in terms of sacrificing traditional liberties, also the disciplinary sanctions. Quite a lot of them in secret are about opposing viewpoints. And you're not being marked on your view, you're more being marked on your ability to pull together rational, logical argument without, you obviously can't go away and research. So it's about, can you use what you know? Can you apply almost common sense and think about what perspectives there might be on these topics? So specific LNAT universities, not that many of them in the UK ask for this test, and disclaimer, it does vary each year. So basically check before you apply. For the 2024 academic year, these are the universities that ask students to complete the LNAT, and I've also put the grades that are required and in A-level and IB form. And as we said to Patrick, this PowerPoint will be available afterwards, so you've got that point of reference there. Some of the universities as well do what's called contextual offers, which is where they take into account you as a person. But I'd recommend researching about contextual offers because it is very specific to each university, and what a contextual offer means, they might lower the grades required, but that is it's not done ad hoc. There's really clear systems and clear channels. So definitely speak to universities directly if you think that applies to you. So if anyone's got any questions, please put your hand up or just unmute yourself. And if not, I will go through some questions that I thought might come up. Okay, I don't think anyone's got any question. Oh.
Anybody? Well, I was just gonna ask. Come on, don't be shy, people. Any questions? You can post in the chat as well, in the wish.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thanks, Patrick. Okay. So I imagine this might be the case. So some people have asked, can you take it early? Say, obviously the academic year starts in September, and can you take it maybe in the summer beforehand? The answer is actually no. You have to take this test within the windows I explained. So it has to be between September and January in the year that you're applying. So slightly before the deadline for applications is end of January. Obviously, the Oxford Cambridge deadline is a little bit earlier, but it's about taking the test in that academic year. So unfortunately, no, you can't take it early. Someone's also asked me before whether it's the same test paper. And so essentially they were kind of asking, oh, do people cheat? Do they come out and tell us the answer? No, it's never the same paper. The LNAT guidance on the website is that it's from a bank of questions and there's thousands. So no person's test will ever be identical, really. Another question I get quite a lot is there a pass or fail mark? No, there isn't. You can't fail the test. It's part A is marked out of 42, as I said. Now, to illustrate the kinds of marks that are common, I think the average for somebody applying to Oxford and Cambridge, the average LNAT Part A mark was about 28 out of 42. It is a tricky test. And then the average mark for somebody at a non-Oxford and Cambridge university, I think, was 22. But that does fluctuate year on year, but it usually sits around those boundaries, which is good because it gives you something to aim for and it makes you know maybe what you need to work on or where you sit or if you're doing okay. There is no formal results day. You don't get the score as you leave the test center or anything like that, unfortunately. Your universities will get the score before you do. You will, I think sometime in January or February, that score will be released to you, but your universities will know it much earlier, particularly Oxford and Cambridge, because their admissions process and the interviews take place in November, December. So they will be looking at that score probably between October to December. They'll have that and be considering it. And maybe $1 million question is, how will my exam be used? It's not very common for any of the universities to publish how they factor in this LNAT, considering it does just form part of a much greater application, which comprises of your personal statement and your grades. So it's actually, there's no set way to use it. My advice would be, obviously, the average scores. So you want to make sure you're scoring not below the average, just so that you don't risk that being maybe a reason why they wouldn't accept you, although you're obviously never going to know because they don't publish decisions in that way. But so I would say the score is maybe on part A of the multiple choice questions. Think of it as a way of getting your foot in the door, making sure you're in that yes pile. Don't give people a reason not to accept you. And your score might be one of them, because obviously they do have to reject people, particularly Oxford and Cambridge. They get so many applicants. With part B, I think that's used to see how you write under pressure. And again, it's the clues in the name. It's the aptitude for studying law. Do you have the skill set that they think you would enjoy the study, be good at it, and that you would progress in law? So just think about that when you're writing your part B. You can resit the test, but you can't resit it in that academic year. So if you got the result in January or you weren't accepted and you didn't think it had gone well and you wanted to do it again, you can, but you'd have to wait until the next academic cycle. You couldn't take it in March and still go to university in September. For a university that required this as part of their admissions process, you just have to wait. There is no general exemption. On exemptions, I think you can write to the university specifically you're applying to and make a case for exemption, but I think those requirements are pretty strict and there is no general exemption, no blanket exemption. Again, should you require reasonable adjustments or have any specific access requirements, go to speak to the university you're applying to and they will look into accommodating that, and each university has its own policy on that. Does anyone have any questions before we speak about this? Any LNAT questions?
We have some questions, but not specifically LNAT. But the question, this is both Arjun and Raya both asked a similar question. What are the popular subject options at A level for a law aspirant? So what would you recommend? Which A level subjects would you recommend if you wanted a career in law in the future? Can you hear me?
Okay, you slightly cut out a little bit there, but it might just have been for me.
So the question is,
it was what A levels should you look for? Obviously, subjects that are writing based, that will build your skill set in terms of reading and writing and comprehension and arguing and structure, which will obviously prepare you best for studying law. However, really don't be put off if you maybe haven't chosen subjects such as English, literature or English language, history, psychology, sociology, essay-based subjects. Universities will never accept you based on your A levels. So some of my friends who have studied law at university and were admitted no problem actually had more general subjects, so some science ones, some languages. It's not a fixed system, and please don't worry if you are concerned about that. Any A level you do will help you, and it's actually maybe in your personal statement where you can, if you've done a science A level, you might be able to highlight, I liked this, I'd maybe like how I would use this in my career or what skills I've learned, or maybe there was an aspect of, say, you've done maths and you enjoyed problem solving. That's really crucial to a career in law and studying law. So although those essay-based subjects might help you maybe transition into the essay-based work better, they won't necessarily make a difference in your overall career or time at university. Does that make sense? Any further questions?
So there's no compulsory subjects to study.
No.
It's just any academically strong subject, and it's mainly by getting the grades, right, for the university, rather than the subjects itself.
Completely. Yeah, as far as I'm aware, no university has specific law A-level entry requirements. Obviously check, but it's not that common because it's all about application. If you've got A stars and A's in any subject, you are clever and you will be able to study law.
Right. Another question, is the LNAT to be taken in relation to each university application separately? That's from Mustafa.
That's a really good question. No, so don't worry, you don't have to take it more than once. If you are what is common is, say you are applying to Oxford and Cambridge as one of your choices, but you get 5. And so obviously some of those will be non-Oxford and Cambridge choices. With the timing, because you still have to adhere to the Oxford-Cambridge deadline, you're going to have to, even though if you just applied to other universities, you might have till January to do the LNAT. Because you've got that Oxford and Cambridge application, you'll have to do it in October. And then that score will be sent to them all. There's nothing you have to do. It's all internal and it's all linked.
Right. Okay. And the next question from Arjun again, what's the recommended preparation time for LNAT? So presumably if you have to do it by January, how long should you give yourself to prepare?
I'd say It depends how intensely you're doing it. I'd say a shorter preparation, a shorter, more intense preparation, maybe about a month to 4 to 6 weeks. If that's kind of all you've got going on, or is you can do a few hours a day. If you're doing maybe less hours in a day or in a week, spread it over a longer period of time. However, the resources are finite. Although they've got an endless bank of questions, what you will come to realize when you prepare is questions from the official LNAT body that make the exam are really limited. They haven't updated them in years. There's only, I think, 2 mock papers. So although I want ideally advanced preparation, there is only a certain amount you can do using those official materials.
Right. Okay. And just to reiterate, Arjun, so Sophie is one of our tutors, part of our team. So if you are interested in LNAT tutoring, then I'll talk about it at the end of the presentation, how you can proceed if you wish, and you can book one of our tutors like Sophie to help you with that.
Yeah, me and lots of other people having taken the test are experienced, and a lot of it's about confidence as well. It's about it's doing the work and putting in the practice, but also getting confidence up in answering the questions, which comes hand in hand with the practice as well. So another question on that, sorry, I can't see the
Uh,
box as I'm presenting.
no, that's fine. That's it for the moment.
Okay. Great, thanks very much. I'll now speak about law interviews in general. So, firstly, don't be put off by it. Universities want to get to know you better. There's only so much they can learn about you from your paper application. They use the interviews, again, similarly to the LNAT. They're never going to, unfortunately, publish the exact science of how they use the interviews and how they score or anything like that. But overall, it's to assess your suitability to the course and whether you would fit in at the university as a whole. They're looking for your interest in and commitment to the subject, which don't be by that. Universities know you're at a very early stage, you're between 16 and 18. And what they look for in terms of interest and commitment is not what you've done, which is the most impressive, but what have you done that you can to learn more about things, to what did you like, what did you then go and explore more of? And that doesn't have to be necessarily in-person activities. It can be using the resources you have on the internet to maybe join free seminars and things like that. They want to see evidence of your thinking skills, your problem-solving skills, and how analytical you are, and how you actually communicate that to them as well is really important. They're assessing your standard of spoken English, as there are language requirements. They're also interested in you as a person, so your non-academic achievements and your extracurricular interests, any positions of responsibility or trust you've had, whether you were head of something at school or out of school. They also understand you are nervous and will try and put you at ease and will do their best to make it as much of a comfortable environment for you as possible. Like, for example, they might start with you might be taken aback because they feel like quite simple questions, but maybe ask you something about your statement because that's something that you know really well, and therefore you'll feel quite comfortable opening up and beginning the conversation in that way. You might actually be given some material before to review in like a kind of holding area. They might ask you to arrive about an hour before, excuse me, and have a look. And they might give this material to everyone, ask you some questions about that, and ask you to have a view, maybe answer some questions, what you think, whether it was a problem or not, and talk about your solution. And then they might use that to leap off in the interview and discuss. So not that many universities actually interview for law anymore. It does change year on year. So again, my disclaimer, just make sure you do your research before. So it's Bristol, Cambridge, UCL, which is University College of London, Oxford University, and the University of York. were universities interviewing for law this year? My top tips in general: structure your answers. Often it's known as the STAR interview method: situation, task, action, response. Situation, so it's kind of describing what you're talking about, then moving on to what was required of you, what did you have to do, and then how did you identify what you had to do, and then the action, so what actions did you take, what skills did you use, what did you demonstrate, and then reflect or response. What would you do differently? Kind of what went well. And it's a good way to demonstrate you to get those keywords in there and those key experiences, but also in an interview setting so that your answer is structured and concise and really gets to the bottom of their question. My other tips would be to think out loud. And by that, I mean, they want to know the processes you're going on in your head. Particularly, an example would be if you weren't sure about the answer to a question and you would say, well, based on this piece of information you've given me, I would investigate this or I'd think this. However, because of this part of the problem, I'm unsure how I would proceed. And it just thinking out loud shows that you're weighing up the different factors and gives them an insight into how you analyze. Research thoroughly. It's so upsetting when you're interviewing someone and they come unstuck and they've been really good on a question that they should know the answer to. By that, I mean really obvious ones that they're going to ask you: why that university, why that course, as I've, revised answers at the bottom for obvious questions. And you should be able to answer those, not in a rehearsed way, but you should know those anyway because they're personal to you. But always have a think about them in advance of the interview because you might be nervous. So it's just good, even though you know them, it's just good to have them on the tip of your tongue. Practice. Practice on anyone who will listen. Talking out loud is a required skill for most people, whether they work in law or not. And the more you do it, the better you get. It's particularly good to practice on people that you would maybe be a bit embarrassed of, is one of the things I do. Like if you can do it in front of your best friends, or my sister is a good one, then you can kind of do it in front of anyone. And with practice as well, you can also do formal mock interviews. So how will it feel going into the room in front of a panel of more than one person, and how will that environment feel doing the interview for half an hour with, no breaks or whatever. So a formal mock interview is great. You don't want the first time you do this interview to be the first time you've done it, if that makes sense. So the obvious type of questions is: know your statement inside out, why law is really common, why this university, what interests you about this course, any topical legal issues, like what's going on. With the LNAT, I'd said that it's not UK centric. If you are interviewing for law in the UK, because law is so specific, country specific, the topical legal issues are quite likely to be UK centric. So make sure you check out what's going on, what laws are being reformed, what's being debated here, any really big cases that are going on and people are talking about, basically. And tell me about yourself, which can be a bit of a daunting question, but if you've prepared for it, then you'll be fine. So does anyone have any questions on interviews before I will start with some of the ones I thought people might ask? I can't see the box, so
There's nothing in the
okay.
box at the moment.
That's fine. Thank you, Patrick. So what if I don't know the answer? It's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to Patrick in a form of interview. It's not as daunting as you think, and it will happen, partly because as you go through interviews, maybe they're trying to test you, they're trying to challenge you, they're trying to see how you respond. So if you don't know the answer, don't panic. You don't necessarily need to say, I don't know explicitly, but use your common sense. What do you know about the topic? Can you give an informed view? You don't necessarily have to give an answer. You could just maybe discuss the key points around the question. And don't be, again, don't be backed into a corner. I know it's quite difficult to say if they spot maybe that you don't necessarily know the answer, and don't be concerned if they try and drill down an answer out of you. They're just trying to see how you respond. Just remain cool, remain calm, and if you have to, just repeat what you've said. Do I have to ask a question at the end is a really common one. No, you don't get extra marks for that. If you do have a legitimate question that they haven't answered during the interview or that you couldn't have found out online, so I wouldn't say ask an obvious one because it might highlight that you perhaps hadn't done your research. But no, you don't have to ask a question at the end if there isn't a genuine one. It's not marked. And reasonable adjustments, obviously everyone is different. If you do have any reasonable adjustments, then make sure you communicate that to your specific university in advance of the interview, maybe when you get the date, and then you can go from there, and just to ensure that all of those adjustments can be in place before the interview starts, or you don't want any stresses on the day. So moving on now to law at Oxford and Cambridge. I put this statistic up at the top because it really illustrates the point of just how many people apply for these undergraduate places each year. At Oxford, they get about 22,000 applications for 3,300 places. I'm not a maths whiz. I'm sure somebody can do the percentage, but it's a small percentage of people that get a place, with about 10,000 candidates interviewed. Now, studying law at Oxford and Cambridge is really different to studying it in the rest of the UK. Everyone else at other English universities will have actually a really similar experience, but Oxford and Cambridge would not share that because most of the teaching is done in tutorials, which are colloquially known as tutes. Tutorials attendance is mandatory, you must attend, it's not optional. Lectures are actually not mandatory, and there are very few lectures at Oxford and Cambridge. Lectures are almost not like a treat, but there to supplement. They're something different where everybody comes together. Whereas the tutorial, where you do 100% of your core learning, is a very small meeting between a tutor and 2 or 3 students maximum. And that's how you'll have your classes, how you'll have they're your lessons, they're your lectures. So it's an incredibly small environment, and there is nowhere to hide, which some people would really thrive and enjoy, and others maybe not so much. It's not suited to them. So I think it is something to bear in mind when you apply. And there is a significant level of independent study required in advance. When you're in the tutorial, it's not the teacher monologuing as I kind of am now. It's you've done all of the work in advance, you've done all of the reading, all of the cases, you're very, very prepared, and it's a discussion. So it's not necessarily the tutor imparting knowledge and you writing it down. It's a dialogue where you will be kind of pushed and challenged to give your views. It's occasionally you might have some preparation classes for a tutorial, but that is considered the student's job. You would have 3 tutes a week, every 2 weeks, give or take. And that means you are required to churn out 1.5 essays every week. Now, this is again where Oxford and Cambridge law completely differs to law anywhere else. Those essays that you have to churn out every week are not marked. They do not go towards your degree. You can't ask them to be, even if you did a really good one and you wanted to. You do get feedback on them every week, but they do not contribute to your final mark in any way. There are 2 exam periods throughout your whole 3-year law degree at Oxford and Cambridge. The first is your mods, which is the end of your second term in your first year. Those exams are really, really important because you must pass them in order to be able to continue and do the rest of your law degree there. Again, although they're very, very important, they they do not count towards your final grade. Your finals, which is the end of your third year, so the end of your last year, you will take every single exam. That's everything you've learned in 3 years, you will be examined on at the end of the final year, and your degree classification will be determined entirely by these marks. I don't say this to scare you. I think it's just good to know that that is the structure there. And that's very, very different from other universities where it's more of a piecemeal percentage approach. Other universities in England, generally first year doesn't count. That's the same across the board. But then from there, you start building up your mark percentage through exams in second year, through pieces of coursework, and in third year as well. So there's none of the whole, I don't know what my grade will be until the end. It's actually that you'll have a good rough idea of what you're on throughout. So nothing will be a surprise. So the college system is another unique features of Oxford and Cambridge. A college refers to one of the universities, there's about 40 colleges at each university. They're sometimes likened to houses in school or in Harry Potter. They are small, multidisciplinary communities, which just means they are geographically, the city's pretty old. They are all in an old building. They were all founded hundreds of years ago. Multidisciplinary just means that there are lots of people studying lots of different subjects in each college. You wouldn't just because you studied law doesn't mean you'd all go to the same college. Instead, it's actually that you'd have a few law students in each college. It kind of works more like that. And it is a real sense of community. Each has academic staff, admin staff, accommodation, sports teams, facilities, and events. It each has its own unique character and history and known for different things. So some colleges are known, for example, as the Prime Minister's College. Oxford obviously produces quite a few prime ministers in the UK, but you can drill down even more into that, and certain colleges have a really high number. That's just an example of what one is known for or renowned for. In terms of applying to a college, you can do your research and you can give a preference on your application form. Sometimes you might get that preference and sometimes you won't, and that's what's known as being pooled. So if you are accepted into Oxford and Cambridge because of on your academic interview and they want you to do that course, but your college said, no, we don't have a place for you, that doesn't impact your admission at all. You'll just be put in a pooling system to find a place for you in another college. So that's nothing to be concerned about. Not getting into the college is not the same as not getting in at all or overall. So the key stages for Oxford and Cambridge, most of the beginning bit is the same, but just at an earlier timescale. So choosing your course, maybe choosing your college, and you don't have to give a college preference. A lot of people say, I don't mind what college I'm in. Complete your personal statement and apply through UCAS for the earlier deadline. Do your LNAT by the earlier deadline. You might then, in the interim between October and November, ask to do a bit of written work. You will then receive in November a notification of whether you are successful in getting an interview. You will then be interviewed between November and December, and you will hear about that decision in January. So the Oxford-Cambridge interview specifically, it can be online or it can be in person. It's really dependent on the college or the department. They actually publish guidance online in terms of their interview timetable. So this year, the college interviews, the first round are between the 9th and the 11th of December. And then they'll communicate the decision by the 12th of December. And if they want you to do a second interview, that would happen on the 13th. So that week this year will be a really key week. And if you are applying and you do receive notification of an interview, do check that timetable online if they don't send it to you directly, because then you'll be able to plan ahead and clear your week, because if you've got an interview at Oxford and Cambridge, I think you want to really commit to that for the week. You want to give yourself the best possible chance. You don't want to be running around stressing with other commitments. That will be time consuming and stressful enough. And it is highly likely you'll have more than one interview. It's quite rare to just have one. You'll be interviewed by academic tutors who teach that subject at the university and research it, so they decide who studies there. So you'll be interviewed by people that will probably go, if you get in, go and teach you in the future. I have got some of the guidance from the websites and pasted it here. Decisions are based on your ability to think independently and to engage with new ideas beyond the scope of your school and college syllabus. Academic conversation about the subject that you're interested in studying. So I think the key takeaways from both those pieces of guidance is they want to see that you're interested, and the way they want to see it is that you've spent some time researching it yourself. It doesn't really matter what you spend time on, but have you put that thought in? Are you really committed? Are you able to have a view on it? Are you able to speak to them about that view and be challenged on it? So use the resources they provide. I have really capitalized. This is, in the last few years, I'd say quite new. Probably won't feel new to your generation, but I think as part of demystifying the Oxford-Cambridge process, which did used to be shrouded in quite a lot of secrecy, there are now videos on YouTube, on college websites, on the university websites about the interviews and what they will be like. Use those resources. Look at the questions they ask, know the structure. They've put those out there for a reason, and that is the best guidance you'll be able to have. That is their official interview guidance, I guess. So make sure you know those. And lastly, do some mock interviews. Practice that formal panel style interview. Arrange those. And again, practice speaking out loud with friends and family. And you can even do it about your personal statement. You'll be surprised at how much you come on just doing those little bits of practice and just talking out loud and speaking through things. Does anybody have any questions about Oxford and Cambridge interviews or about anything?
Any questions? I've got a few, but I'll save them up.
Hi, Sophia. This side Nidhi here.
Hi.
Yeah, thank you for the informative session. I just wanted to understand about the SQE1 and SQE2 exam because students are eager to know about. I mean, you are there in the track, so you know it well. I mean, students are looking either for solicitor or barrister. So I know barrister is a big task, but how to go for the solicitor? So I know SQE1 is SQE2 is a big task to crack it up. So can you please explain how to go to that track?
My final slide is about solicitor and barrister qualification. So if you don't mind, will come to that, and I will give you a comprehensive answer about SQE1 and SQE2, which, as I'm sure you know, are very, very new exams, solicitor qualifying exams. They are fresh and they are notoriously difficult. They've got a 50% pass rate at the moment, but I will explain a little bit more about that at the end. But any Oxford, Cambridge questions thus far? No. Okay, can you apply to both? No. At undergrad, you cannot apply to both Oxford and Cambridge. So you have to choose one, I'm afraid. And how do you choose a college if you would like to choose a college? That's totally your personal preference. You can, if you are able to visit, you can walk around, attend open days, but also, as kind of Patrick said at the start, studying is a big part of it, but it is a small part. It's about a lifestyle change. It's about your hobbies and your interests and what's important to you. You might choose a college because you've seen they've got some new accommodation and it looks like the facilities are really great. They've got, nice rooms, nice halls, really nice catering and good gym facilities. You might choose a college because you're into a particular sport and you choose a college that is known for its sport, or maybe even more specifically, its football. you might be into politics, and therefore you might have a think about what sort of college aligns with my beliefs and what I might want to do after university. So yeah, it's a really personal process, and don't be disheartened if you don't get into your college of choice. Quite frequently, oh, I'll just finish this sentence and then we'll go for the lovely hand up. Quite frequently, people are like a bit upset about not getting into their chosen college, and then by the end of their 3 years, they absolutely love the college that they have been studying at. They wouldn't have gone anywhere else, and so it really, the experience really makes it. Question from Arjun.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. Do the colleges offer campus visits for prospective students? Is that a norm, or how do we get to see the colleges?
So that's a great question. On open days, the universities, Oxford and Cambridge, they do open days, and all of the colleges are open. So you don't have to worry about coming 40 times and aligning with your college's open day. When Oxford and Cambridge have a general open day, all of the colleges are open, which is an amazing experience in itself. It's quite big old buildings with gates which are usually shut, and you need a pass to get in, and there are porters. But on open days, you can walk into all of the colleges, you can walk through the grounds, there'll be students outside with big t-shirts on. Everyone is really friendly, and you can, eat in the dining hall, you can look at the library, and you'll be speaking to current students who are a student at that college, so you can get the best advice from them and hear about their personal experience.
Thank you.
That's all right. Any more questions on this topic?
I had a question. I mean, if you have the ability to, and you feel confident enough, would you always advise having a crack at Oxford or Cambridge as opposed to the other universities, or are there advantages of going to the other universities as well?
That's a really good question, and because I've actually been to both a Oxford and Cambridge University, obviously going to Oxford, and a non-Oxford Cambridge University, just a regular one in England, the experiences are different. They both have positive and negative benefits. If you don't go to Oxford and Cambridge, you do spend less time studying, and all the studying is less intense. So if you're looking to do other things while you're in England, and obviously studying is your priority, but maybe you've got other priorities as well, then I wouldn't necessarily apply to Oxford and Cambridge, because their guidance is to treat it like a full-time job. They recommend, I think, 45 hours to 50 hours a week of studying. However, the flip side is the experience at Oxford and Cambridge is incredibly unique. It's incredibly special. It is hard work, but not only is it a unique experience while you're there, if you're thinking about your opportunities after you graduate, then Oxford and Cambridge has a great career service. Obviously, the reputation speaks for itself, and that you attended one of those universities will be on your CV for the rest of your life, and the skills you learnt there will help you in the rest of your life. If you have heard all of this and you're not put off by the amount of work that you have to do, then definitely apply. You can't, what's the phrase? Something about, if you don't ask, you don't get. You've seen the statistics. There's a lot of people that do apply, but they let a lot of people in for law, 3,500. So there are the places, and yeah, definitely do it if you're thinking about it, because then you won't regret it in any way. At least you had a go.
Yeah, that's true, isn't it? So I couldn't imagine when you put the statistics up, I can't imagine doing 10,000 interviews.
Which is why I don't think they're very long. They obviously vary, but so that's just something to bear in mind. And it's good to know that they're interviewing about 10,000, because they're interviewing half of applicants, basically. So
and those are physical interviews, or are they online?
It varies. It does vary. They used to be all in person, but obviously the pandemic did change things. So I don't, it's all college dependent as well, whether they take a hybrid approach, whether if you say, oh, I would prefer this, whether they grant it or not, or whether they say no, all in person. It is quite individualistic with Oxford and Cambridge. So it's quite hard to give a blanket overall. Each college is actually chartered as well.
Right.
So it's got its own governing system, basically.
Right. Thank you for the answer. Anybody else have any questions for Oxford and Cambridge?
Okay, we'll move on. So returning lastly to the kind of next steps in terms of after your law degree, unfortunately, you cannot just practice straight away. That is something I wished people had told me a little bit more when I was applying and when I was looking, that just because you have a law degree doesn't mean that you can start straight away. There are quite a lot of other loopholes in England and Wales that you've got to jump through, but thousands of people do it every year. It is possible, it just takes a little bit of time. So in England and Wales, we have solicitors and barristers. Lawyer is kind of the overall term, and lawyers fall into this category. You're either a qualified solicitor or a qualified barrister. A solicitor is employed by a law firm, and it can be, you know, law firms range in size. Some are tiny, some are international. They might do a variety of different areas of law, or they might specialize. But overall, the job of a solicitor is to advise clients, negotiate, and prepare the case. A barrister, by comparison, is self-employed, so they work for themselves. They do work out of something called chambers, which is basically lots of different, it's a bit similar to the college system, Oxford and Cambridge. There are lots of different chambers and which each house self-employed barristers. So you're a member of chambers, but you work for yourself, but you're a member because you pay them a fee and they sort out all of your work. So they act like agents. And in return, you give them a percentage for sorting out your diary and keeping you booked and busy, basically. As a barrister, your day job is court advocacy. It's talking, public speaking, and presenting the case. Now, in order to be a solicitor or barrister, you have to have your law degree. And then you have to do specific, what's termed vocational training, which is either the SQE or the BTC. I'll do the BTC first because it's a lot easier and more straightforward. It's known as the barrister training course. Sometimes they change the letters. It's the same thing. It takes about 9 months to a year. You are then called to the bar of England and Wales. You can get your wig and gown, and that's you ready for being a barrister, ready to start your training as a barrister. The SQE and being a solicitor has recently changed. There's been quite a big overhaul. It used to be called the LPC, which is the legal practice course. If you see any of that online in relation to the LPC, it looks like you can still choose that option, which is easier. You won't be able to, unfortunately. The way they've phased out this qualification is that you have to have completed your law degree by a certain time to be able to still do the LPC option. And by 2030, no one is going to be allowed to do that option, and everybody will be doing the SQE. So if you do see that online, unfortunately, it's very unlikely to apply to you. But the SQE has two parts, as somebody has very kindly already said. There is SQE1 and SQE2. Once you've completed the whole of the SQE, you will be a qualified solicitor and you'll be ready to be a trainee solicitor. You can do the SQE part-time, you can do it full-time. Obviously, if you do it full-time, it's quicker. But the part one is a set of multiple choice exams. There is a lot of content to get through. It's a really information dense exam. The exams themselves are quite tough. SQE1 involves some 6-hour exams, and similarly to the LNAT, actually you have to go to a test centre now, and you do those SQE1 exams in a test centre and you wait for your result. You do the whole booking thing. SQE2 is a bit different. you do SQE2 once you've passed SQE1. You get 3 attempts to pass both the bar course and the solicitors course, and SQE2, whereas SQE1 is the multiple choice information, kind of a traditional exam. SQE2 is more practical. It's about, you'll have some talking exams, you might have some conference exams. So yeah, it's more of a practical skills element of being a solicitor, but so no more written exams after that. Any more questions about that? And does that answer the earlier question on SQE 1 and 2?
Hi, Nidhi, you asked the question. Is that answered?
Yes, exactly. Because, the student is looking after that only. What after doing the law program? Either it's the bachelor's or for the law, because they can't even direct practice under that. So they have to go with that SQE1. And that too, even I have research on that. It is very competitive. And it's very not easy to crack that.
No.
Yeah.
It is a very new exam, and because it's new and it is more difficult, the pass rates I think are sitting at about 50% for SQE1, but hopefully as more people I think realize the preparation work that's required, whereas I think with the one before it wasn't as difficult, so I think the preparation required wasn't as intense, and maybe it wasn't as clear, or people didn't realize how hard the SQE1 will be. I imagine in the next few years the pass rate will go up, as I'm sure people get more experienced in teaching it, as everyone gets more experienced in how much time they'll need to dedicate to it. I do imagine that pass rate will go up a bit, but it is challenging, SQE1, especially the exam. They're 6-hour exams.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, a student after completing the master's program, if they have prepared themselves, so they can directly go for SQE1 exam, or is there anything, the things that the student have to do?
You can start the SQE as soon as you've done your law degree. You don't necessarily need to do a separate master's. You can do if you'd like, but if you want to get straight into being able to practice, then yeah, some people do go ahead from their university undergraduate law studies and go straight into the SQE.
And how many attempts are they providing for SQE1? Is there any bar set under that?
I think it's 3,
Really?
but I did the BTC and not the SQE, so definitely check that, but I'm pretty sure it's 3 attempts.
Yeah.
And for SQE1 there's 2 exams, so it might be that you pass one and fail the other, and depending on how those exams are paired up, before you take them, you want to be sure that you're in the best place to pass them, so that say you pass one and fail another, you don't have to redo them both again. If that makes sense. I've got another hand up.
Yeah, this is Mustafa here. I just wanted to check on the SQE. Is it similar to the previous QLTS which the SRA used to conduct?
I think it's similar in some ways, but mostly quite different. The previous it was called the legal practice course. It was a lot more based on, I think, practical skills, and you could be a little bit more selective with the modules that you took. So you could maybe say you wanted to do family law or commercial law. Everybody would have to do the same kind of core content, but you could elect those perhaps. You don't get any electives in the SQE. And actually, frustratingly with the SQE,
I wasn't referring to the LPC. I was referring to the QLTS, the Qualified Lawyers Transfer Scheme, which they had. Is it so? Because that also had 2 parts, and I've done that. I have qualified as a solicitor through the QLTS back in 2021-22. So it was similar, and multiple choice test and the practical one later.
Yeah.
So it sounds similar. Is it similar to, do you have any idea?
I actually don't. I'm really sorry. I don't know about the transferring requirements for solicitors. Sorry, I could look that up and I could give advice, but I don't want to say anything now. But as you've done it, it is possible to do, but it's different for being a barrister and being a solicitor, and I'm more familiar with the barrister one.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
There was another question from Yana. Is the final exam the same as the bar exam, or is that totally different?
The exams are different, although there's not maybe intentional crossover. It's just that with the bar exams, everybody does core subjects, and you have to take a conference exam. You have to take an ethics exam with the bar course. You have to do some advocacy, which you have to do like cross-examination, like you're doing a criminal trial. With the SQE, because being a solicitor isn't the same as being a barrister in terms of being in the courtroom, the SQE does have some in SQE2 there are some practical exams, but they are more specific to what you'd be required to do as a solicitor in terms of if you ever have to appear in court. It's more tailored towards that. So they're similar in the sense that there is some practical elements, but the practical elements are specific to the roles you're going into. Have I explained that correctly? Or just understanding?
Did that answer your question, Yana? Yes, it did.
Great, thank you.
I have a question. Is there a minimum age, or sorry, a maximum age to be a lawyer solicitor? Like, say, if I I did a degree in physics and something else, a master's, and then after I work in a few years, and I suddenly realize, actually, I want to be a lawyer, and I go back to school and do a 3-year law degree. Is there a maximum, or is there a postgraduate entry way to get into this, or from another subject?
There's actually no maximum age. The closest maximum age I can think of is if you are a judge, they make you retire at a certain age. I think it's 73 or around that time. But apart from that, you can do this at any stage. And it actually is becoming more and more common for people to perhaps an organic route, have a career, work in an industry, let's say maybe in technology, and then go, oh, actually, if I qualify as a lawyer, I'm in a really good place to advise on this and present these cases and work in that industry, litigating it, because I have that practical experience behind me. So that is quite common that people do that after having maybe a first career. It's also, being a lawyer the skills you need are entirely transferable. You can get them from other aspects of your life, whether you're 16 and have a part-time job, or whether you're 48 and you've had in the height of your career, you can always use the skills you've learned in law. You could do the 3-year undergraduate degree. There's also something called, I don't know if it's called the GDL anymore. That's used to stand for Graduate Diploma in Law. It was a conversion.
Right.
You can do a year for a conversion if you didn't want to do the full 3 years. You still have that same tick the box, I've got a law degree, so I can then do my vocational training. But the advantages to that are perhaps that it is a year long, so you can do it more quickly. However, if you wanted maybe a more full and rigorous grounding in law, you might want to get that from the 3 years rather than the 1.
Right. Yes. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Okay, interesting follow-up question. How do you become a judge?
Well, it's a bit early in my career, but no. You actually it's called the Judicial College, from what I understand, and you basically go to judge school for a bit. You apply, I think you have to have been in practice for a certain amount of time, whether that's a hard and fast rule or not, but I think, you need to have had sufficient experience of the law. Some people start as part-time judges, which are called, in I Do Crime, which are called being a recorder. You do some practice and some part-time judging, get a bit of experience in it, get your foot in the door. And actually, like any career, as recorders, as part-time judges, you tend to deal with or district judges, which sit in the magistrates' court. You tend to deal with smaller matters, and they start you off that way. You tend to deal with more simple cases, and then obviously as you become more, even though you were experienced in practice, as you become more experienced, you work your way up, and then you might I think you have to wait till a vacancy comes up and you apply to it's called sitting, to sit as a full-time judge. And even then there are layers to judging. Obviously there's Supreme Court justices and High Court judges, but there's like in England and Wales, you have different areas of the country which are legally known as circuits. So you might sit as, you might be leader of a circuit. So you're the head judge for a few courts. And then within a giant court in London, some courtrooms, there are 20. So you've got 20 judges. You might be the resident judge of that court. So yeah, there's lots of stages even of a judging career.
Wow, okay. Interesting. And the other, I've probably been watching too many TV shows, but presumably as a lawyer, or solicitor or barrister, you can represent the prosecution or the defending side, right? How does that depend on the company you're working for? Do most law companies have, you know, both sides of the thing, or they just concentrate on one, or how does that work?
That's a really interesting and nuanced question. Some chambers and some companies, and the very few, but they say we are defence only. So they are people who are at that chambers only defend. Some chambers, again, very small amount, only prosecute. But for the majority of people in between, they do a bit of both. They obviously not on the same case, but there's no kind of rule about doing that. A lot of people like it. It's more varied for them. It's more diverse, but some people say it makes you better having done both sides because you have to use different parts of your brain, and it you know, it can give you tactical advantages. You know what you do in that position when you're not. So, yeah.
Oh, interesting. And another question, sorry, lots of questions. A lot of course, our students that we work with are from the GCC area, and they're interested in coming to the UK to study law, and hopefully stay on to do the vocational training and pass those exams. A lot of them might be thinking, "Oh, can I have a career in the UK as a lawyer?" Is there a huge demand for lawyers in the career? Are there a lot of international students that go right through the system and stay on and maybe settle in the UK? Is that quite common, or?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really common, and I see it in terms of my peers when I was at law school, but I also see it now. I'm in my professional law firm. People have sometimes qualified elsewhere and then transferred. People have stayed qualified through the UK system, having come to study and stayed here. And I think there will always be work for lawyers, although that work changes in terms of how society moves and evolves. But with the advent of technology, as some jobs change, some jobs also crop up. Like, for example, AI law is going to be, which is something we didn't even think about a few years ago, but that's, you know, new niche fields are always popping up, and there'll always be consistently the need to, I guess, prosecute and defend people and to assist on commercial transactions and family law. So yeah, there's a lot of areas, and I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon.
Right, yeah, okay. It's interesting because obviously people are always, you know, because they're going to be investing for a 3-year law degree and paying the full fees. They're always interested in what the demand for lawyers is and what the options are for staying on and getting those professional qualifications. And there's an industry, for want of a better phrase, there's an industry body that looks after the standards for lawyers, yeah. And
Yeah,
you become a member of that as well, so.
Yeah, so we are regulated as lawyers. Solicitors and barristers are regulated. Professional people who work with the public are always regulated by a certain body. A good example is doctors, dentists, teachers, lawyers as well. The solicitors are regulated by the SRA, the Solicitors Regulatory Authority, and barristers are regulated by the Bar Standards Board. So there are as a lawyer, both solicitor and barrister, you have ethical requirements, you have conflict requirements, you have requirements in your personal life not to bring the profession into disrepute, which often is having a conviction yourself. And so those bodies will become involved if they have to, but you've got to keep them in mind.
Yeah, I can imagine ethics and all the other important factors, of course.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Are there any other questions from anybody else? Yeah, have you come to the end of your presentation?
I have. Yeah, I was just going to say, there's going to be some upcoming work experience and career insight opportunities. So get in touch with Patrick if that's something you're interested in. Those can be in person, I think, and virtual and tailored to what you're needing or interested in. So yeah, any further questions I can answer now. You can send, if you're feeling shy, you can send an email at any point, and it will get forwarded to me. But there's nothing more unless anyone has a question.
Any other questions from anybody? You put your hand up or just jump in.
Okay. Patrick, would you like me to stop sharing? So
yeah,
that you...
please, and I'll finish off.
Great. I think that's all done now.
Thank you. So, just to wrap up. Thank you very much for coming and attending. If you want further information, you can come to our office, book a meeting. If anybody wants to speak with one of the consultants right now afterwards, I can arrange that in a breakout room. So just put a message in the chat box if you want to. We have all your contact details, so somebody will contact you anyway. Or you can call the office. We have offices all over the GCC, and you can call on these numbers. You can visit our website. We have a brand new website. So if you go to glinksgroup.com, we just changed it in the last couple of days. This looks far nicer now. So take a look at that. But you can call us and contact us. We'll be contacting you. If you're interested in the tutoring with one of our tutors like Sophie, then please let us know. We have the service for the tutoring, and then as Sophie mentioned, there are some work experience packages coming up, either physically in the UK or virtually, to help you with your applications. There's obviously the tutoring for the exams, tutoring for the interviews, and all the things in between, covering everything. So we thank you very much for attending today. We are recording this meeting, as said, so I will upload it over onto YouTube in the next 24 hours, and I'll send it out to everybody, a link, so that you can view it in your own at your own leisure, review it. Please join me in thanking Sophie for coming along today to join us. We thank you very much for your time. We will be repeating this at some point. I'll have to arrange that with Sophie. But the idea would be to repeat this regularly throughout the year. Particularly the deadline for applications, as Sophie mentioned, is January, apart from Oxford and Cambridge, which we already passed the deadline. So if you need that, tutoring, you need to get involved now, so that we can line you up with a tutor like Sophie to help you through the LNAT and the interviews. So please get in touch with us. We'll be in touch with you anyway, and we can give you the options for the tutoring, the packages, the pricing, etc. And we can kick that off as soon as possible for you.
Yeah. Thanks very much for everyone for coming. And thank you, Patrick, for having me.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.